Chapter 24. The rain came hard that night, and red clay ran down the hillside into our hair and down our backs. The three of us sat shivering with wet blankets hanging over our shoulders. I realized I'd made a mistake. Pap had always told me that shelter was the most important thing in the forest. He said you could go for days without water and even weeks without food, but being caught out in a storm would get you sick, maybe even dead. The one thing I knew we had going for us was that it wouldn't get too cold as long as we had cloud cover to keep the heat down near the ground. The temperature was still well above freezing. We might not get sick if we made a shelter and dried out our clothes and blankets before nightfall the next day. Let's go find a magnolia tree, I yelled at them through the storm. The leaves are big enough to keep the rain off. They looked up and nodded at me with chattering teeth. We walked stiffly through the darkness, trying to place our feet where they didn't slide out from under us with the mud. The dogs followed like they didn't care and didn't feel the rain at all. I located a magnolia and I pointed for them to get under its broad leaves. The three of us crawled beneath and sat with our backs against the trunks. Holly trees could keep you out of the rain too, I said. They didn't respond. The dogs settled a few yards from us and watched with their chins on their paws. The rain didn't come as hard and under the tree, but still dripped on us steadily. Hal was the first to put the wet blanket over his head for protection. Kit soon followed, and I was left staring at two lumps beside me. We're going to have shelter tomorrow, I said loudly, and weapons. We'll be able to kill a deer and get meat. Neither of them replied or moved from under their blankets. And no school, I reminded them. And we'll shut up, Moon, Hal yelled. I grew sick with worry as Hal's words echoed in my head. I wanted to ask Kit if he was mad at me too, but I was afraid of what he might say. I lowered my chin to my chest and I let my own teeth start to chatter. The rain poured around us and dripped from the leaves down onto my head and then off my bangs and into my lap. After a while, I pulled the blanket over my head. I crossed my arms and I shivered. The storm slowed to a cold drizzle in the dark early morning hours. Please sit up. Thank you. The storm slowed to a cold drizzle in the dark early morning hours. No one else stirred when I got up and left for the leaning pine tree. Even the dogs nestled deeper into the leaves and seemed to want no part of moving about. I found my way to the place where we had made the fire and then walked downhill until I saw a black shadow of the leaning pine and I heard the roiling of the swollen creek below. I worked until just after daylight, placing long poles of shaved bay branches against the trunk and crossing them with fans of green pine needles to shed the rain. On the inside of the shelter, I cleared the ground of rocks and sticks so that it would make a smooth surface for the marsh grass. I'd put down later. When the lower shelter was complete, I dragged the soft boughs of bay trees up into the limbs and crisscrossed them to make a platform. On top of those, I laid a bed of dead pine needles that were dried of sap. After an hour after daylight, I had mostly completed a rough shelter that would keep the three of us dry, above the lookout platform where we could also sleep when the weather was warm. The drizzling rain had stopped and the forest was overcast and dripping. When I returned to the magnolia tree, Kit was there with his blanket wrapped around his shoulders. He smiled weakly. Where's Hal? Where's the dogs? I asked. Kit hesitated for a moment. They're gone. Gone? Kit looked worried. Yeah, a while ago he got up and left. The dogs followed him. Back to the fire? Was he looking for me? Where'd he go? He said he was going home. Home? I said. Kit nodded. Already? Which way? Kit pointed up the hill. I spun around and ran. I broke from the trees and searched right and then left, and then I saw Hal and the dogs sitting in the distance. Hal! I yelled. The dogs looked back at me, but Hal stared away. I ran after him, jumping the fallen timber and ducking low branches. Once I tripped and fell on my face. I got up and Hal was watching me. He made me walk the rest of the way until I was stooped before him with my hands on my knees, catching my breath. I thought you were leaving, I said to the ground. I am, as soon as I figure out which way to go. Oh, come on, don't leave, Hal. I just can't do this anymore. I'm cold and wet and hungry. I got ticks in my hair. I stood up. I can get ticks out. Oh, yeah, I know you can do all that. I never seen anybody that knew more about living out. The shelter's almost built. I'm going to make a bow today. I got up early so I can get everything done, I pleaded. I want to get home, he said. Hell, you know all I said about not caring who came, dogs or people? Well, I like it that y'all came. Hal looked down like he didn't know what to say. I cared who came, I said. I'll be honest with you. I could probably take all this for a little while longer, but I want to see my daddy. I got a few more years before I'm 18 and the state releases me. If I got to spend them hiding out, I want to hide out with him as long as possible. I didn't want him to go, and I felt like crying, but I knew he was right. You go ahead then, I said. I wish you were going to stay with us, but I know about Paps, and I'd want to be with mine too. I thought you just didn't like me. Hal shook his head. I just want to see my daddy. Well, you best turn around and go back down the hill where you can follow the creek. If you trace any water long enough, you'll get to roads and people. You taking those dogs with you? I don't seem to have much of a choice. I didn't ask them to come. I've never seen dogs take to liking a person, anybody like that. Hal spit. Well, I want to be mean to him, he said. I better get on if I'm going to find a road and hitch a ride to Daddy's place. I nodded. Hey, good luck with Alaska, he said. All right. Good luck with hiding out with your pap. Hal smiled weakly and turned to go. I was sitting there watching them walk away when Hal turned and looked at me again. Hey, thanks for getting me out of Pinson, Moon.